So this question is called We Be Flipping, and it's a C2, and it's a hard question for C2, it's the hard variant. And what it asks is basically you're given an array called A, and in this array, you will have numbers that are odd and you will have numbers that are even. And what you can do to this array is that for each one operation that you can do as much times as you want is to choose an index I, and the value of this index has to be greater than 0. It has to be positive, so I could choose these three indexes. And once you choose it, you flip all of the parities of the values from I to all the way to 1. So let's say I chose 2, then everything behind this would have their negativity switched and 2 would turn into a negative number. So this would be -1, 3, and -2. And now what the question is asking is, given that you can make any amount of operations in any order, so I could choose 5 and then 3 and then 4 and then 2, I the question wants me to find the largest sum of the entire array that I can find using these operations. So what we can realize is after picking an index, let's say I picked this index right here, I picked index 4, what you can see is that you can turn all the values before this index into negative numbers. And why can you do this? It's because negative numbers, you aren't able to change the positivity, so you will only change the positivity of all the positive numbers. So let's say at 2, I changed 2 to be negative, then everything else after it will change. And I just keep on going down in descending order of the list. And whenever I find a positive number, I just turn that positive number into a negative number, and everything else behind it, uh, I change the signs of them. And then I just keep on doing this until all the values before the index I chose are negative numbers. And after that, I can turn all these values into positive numbers by turning this value into a negative number. So now I have 1, 3, 2, 1, and -10. So what I effectively have done is that I first chose a index with a positive value, and I made this positive value into a negative value, and I turned all the values before this into positive numbers. So now what you can realize is that this is kind of a prefix sum question. And what we can do is, for example, 1, 3, 2, -1, and 10. We can save a prefix sum of all of the absolute values of all the values, and just look at for each positive value, what if this was the positive value that I chose, and I changed all the values before it to be positive? What is the maximum that I can get? So let's say I chose this one. I chose this value right here, 1, the first, the index, which is the 0th index. And here my answer would be the same because I don't change anything. So my answer would be 9. If I chose 2, my answer would be 1 plus 3 minus 2. So it would be 2 minus 1, and this would be 11. And if I chose 10, if I chose 10, which is index 4, my answer would be 1 plus 3 plus 2 plus 1 minus 10, and that would be 4, 6, 7 minus 10 is -3. And then we can see that 2 is the correct answer. So the way we solve this problem is we iterate through all the positive numbers, and we check for each positive number the maximum for out of all positive numbers, the negative of this number plus the absolute value of all the absolute value, the sum of the absolute values of all the values before it. So the formula for each is negative curval plus the sum of the absolute values of all AI, where uh, a I equals 0, and let's say j is the index I take. So this is the answer for each positive value, and to find the entire answer, then I can just go through each positive value and calculate it and find the maximum. And I can do this through prefix sums. So now we can look at the code for this question, I first insert in all the values right here, and I create an integer that saves the sum of all the values. And then I create a prefix and suffix array, and the prefix sum saves the sum of all of the values of all the absolute values, of the sum of all the absolute values. And the suffix sum saves the sum of all the values in descending order. So I do this because after I calculate this value, I still have to account for all the values after it. So for example, I was right here, I still have to account for these values, and I do this through the suffix sum. And after that, I start finding the best value that I can flip, the best positive number. And I do this by keeping an index that is set to -1, and then I loop through all of the values from I to n, and I don't consider the first value, which is the index 0, because no matter what, it won't be worth flipping the 0th index, because if it was positive, I just lose everything. I just lose the uh I just lose I just have a lower sum if I flip the first positive number, and if it's negative, I won't be able to flip it anyways. So I just start from 1, and I create a current sum, and at this current sum, I just find the current sum for each value using this formula, but of course, I'm still adding all the values after it by using the suffix sum, and if the current sum is bigger than the sum, then I set the sum to the current sum, and then I save index I. And then now in this chunk, what I'm doing is I'm constructing the array I want so that all the flips will happen. And I do this by saving a current and an integer called current. And what current tells me is the current sign, or like the current, if it's if it's negative, if it's a negative sign or a positive sign, and which negatives, which out of those two I should pick. And you would kind of see that in the code. So I first go through, I start from the index I want to be flipping, and I go down. And let's just say if I see this value is positive, I want to flip that value. But after flipping that value, the old positive numbers will turn negative, and the old negative numbers will turn positive. So I need to account for that. So every time I flip a number, then I will do cur is equal to 0 minus cur, which flips the sign of 1. And once I do that, I'll know which values were negative, which values became positive after the flips, and because of that, that will make it much easier for me to find the correct values that I need to flip. So if the current value I'm looking for is positive, then and if I find a positive value, I push that value back into my answer array, and then I flip the sign of current, and I do the same if it was negative, and then I then subtract index so I can go further down. And now if save, which is the current index, if the current index is still bigger than or equal to 2, I will still push back the last one, which is save plus 1. Well, sorry, I mean save is the equal to my original index, and I'm doing this so that after making all of the values before this index negative, I want to make the index positive. I want to make all of them positive and flip the current value. So I do that, and then I'll have my answer array, and I print it out. And yeah, it's right here, and you can see my answer right here. And then I will probably link my code into the description. And thank you, and I'll probably look over another question tomorrow. All right, bye.